020 722 42000.
Text 81333. Start your message with the word London.
BBC London 94.9.
Well, that is it. The polls have now closed. You heard Will Schindler say it there in the news. The polls now closed, and we can now talk about the Scottish referendum again. I'm Jason Rossum, in for Simon Lederman tonight on our special Scotland Decides programme. We're going to be keeping you up to date with the latest coming out of those 32 local authority areas in Scotland as the results come through overnight. But we're not actually expecting anything until about 1 or 2 a.m. And our political commentator, Paul Osborne, is going to be here all night long. We're also joined in the studio tonight by Robert Meakin, who's economist and journalist, and Jonathan Davis, who's an economist and wealth manager. We've got people who support yes and no, Scottish and English. And Will Schindler will have bulletins every half an hour here on BBC London 94.9 for our Scottish referendum special. And the people of Scotland have been voting on whether the country should stay in the UK or become an independent nation. Voters have been answering yes or no to the referendum question, should Scotland be an independent country? There are over 4 million people who have voted today, 97% of the electorate who have been registered to vote. It's the busiest day in Scottish electoral history. A little bit later on in the programme, we'll be discovering what it means for us here in London and what it means for you, and whether our Greater London Authority and our own government here in London are going to get tax-raising powers, more powers for the Mayor of London and the Greater London Authority. We'll be looking at that too. But now the polls have closed, we can open up the discussion to you again. So many questions to answer, even though the main one will be answered by the morning. What outcome are you hoping for and why? You can call in, you can text, and you can email as well. What outcome are you hoping for? Do you hope it to be a yes and Scotland is independent, or do you want us to stay together? The number to call, 020 722 42000 is the phone number. You can call now. Mel's answering the phones. You can text 81333 is the text number. Just make sure you start your message with the word London. So put in London, then your message, and send it to 81333. Or you can email me tonight. The email address we're using tonight, jason.rossum, which is ROS for Scotland, AM for Murdoch, at bbc.co.uk. jason.rossum at bbc.co.uk is the email address. So we'd really like your thoughts on this. I know you might have had enough. I mean, I've had enough of it, to be honest. It was nice to have a bit of a rest today and not hearing about the Scottish referendum. But here we are again, 10 o'clock, the polls have closed. We can open up the discussion again. What outcome are you hoping for and why? Will you be sad to see them go if it's a yes vote? Or will you be holding your own party because you think we give them enough of our money already? 020 722 42000. If you had a chance to vote, whether you're Scottish and living in London or you're English, would you have put a cross in the yes box or would you have put a cross in the no box? How do you think the campaign has gone as well? For the no side and for the yes side. I mean, goodness, did you see Gordon Brown come to life yesterday with that speech for the no campaign? Unbelievable. Let's talk about Andy Murray as well, because no one has yet, because he tweeted last night. Not sure whether you're even aware of this. If you haven't been on Twitter or if you haven't looked at the newspaper websites, then you might not be aware that Andy Murray tweeted, yes, he wants Scotland to go independent. Is he now a traitor to the Union? 020 722 42000. Should we take back those Olympic medals he won for Team GB in 2012? He lives in Surrey, doesn't he? So he doesn't get a vote anyway. It doesn't matter what he says. But will you still be supporting him at Wimbledon? And Robert, our guest, Robert Meakin, you mentioned something. A very good evening to you. Thank you for coming in tonight. You mentioned something about Andy Murray's mother.
Poor Judy Murray. She's reliant on the public vote, I believe, from this weekend in Strictly Come Dancing. Yeah. There may be a backlash. She may be going home.
Indeed. I mean, will you be voting for Judy Murray on Strictly Come Dancing anymore now? Well, we don't know what. She didn't tweet anything, did she? We don't know what her opinion is.
Just saying there could be a knock-on effect. But hopefully the English voters on Strictly Come Dancing would not be that bitter and vengeful.
I know that Jamie Murray also tweeted that he was for yes as well, his brother.
Funnily enough, that got overlooked
Yeah, just got overlooked a little. But the thing is,
Andy.
We haven't been able to talk about it until now.
No.
It's been all over Twitter, but if you're not on Twitter and you just listen to the radio or watch the telly, we haven't been able to talk about Andy Murray.
And let's be honest, though, I'm saying as a British tennis fan, there's no question. I think we cling on to Andy Murray, let's be honest, but there's no great other hope coming through the ranks. I think we should be grateful and cling on to him as much as possible. We can't
Absolutely.
lose that Wimbledon title.
We've only got Laura Robson.
Yeah, some of the
no
girls
other
are
male.
good, but the blokes are pretty lousy underneath Murray.
Let's go to Paul Osborne, though, first, just to say, Paul, are you there?
Hello.
Oh, you are there. Marvellous. Paul Osborne, our political commentator, will be with us all the way through till when we get the result in. What, 6:30 they're saying? 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning?
Well, officially, 6:30 to 7:30, according to the person in charge of the count.
Yes.
She's based that on
That
when
rather
they
large woman with the
declared...
blonde hair. She's been everywhere,
Scotland's
hasn't she?
most senior electoral officer.
That's the one.
That's right. She based it on the timings of the announcements of the 2010 election, general election, 2011 Scottish parliamentary election. It was 6:30 to 7:30 when it was done. The difference this time is it's not individual constituencies. It's sort of a running total of the results declared in the 32 local council areas. So wind back a little bit and do a very quick explanation of what's going to happen over the next few hours. The counting is being done in the 32 local council areas across Scotland. Scotland has unitary local councils. It doesn't have sort of boroughs and Greater London Authority like we do. It has unitary councils in each area, 32 of them. They are taking care of the count. They will each report their count figures to the main centre just outside Edinburgh. They verify them, then the local centres declare them. But what we then do is we add them all up into a single running total. So we don't have a final declaration till the last of those 32 declare. Now, we've got a rough idea of the timings.
And we'll be able to tell where it's going.
Yes, because the other thing is it's not. Whereas in an election to a parliament, you've got a certain number of seats and you can see the numbers rise and fall. What we're doing here is we're just adding up the total number of votes. What you have to bear in mind, that, for example, at 2 a.m.-ish, we're expecting a result in North Lanarkshire. So you could say, oh, there we are. But North Lanarkshire accounts for about 6% of the entire electorate in Scotland. At 5 a.m, we get Glasgow. That's nearly 12%. So it really will come down to Glasgow, Edinburgh. It'll come down to a couple of the other really big ones. Fife is another one that you would need to watch out for. Aberdeenshire is another one. These are the really big authorities with significant proportions of the vote. And they're the ones that will tilt the result one way or the other. The counting's already started, but as you say, it's probably going to be 1 to 2 a.m. before we start looking at actually getting the first of these results through. There'll be a glut of them between 3 and 5. 5 o'clock is when hopefully we'll get Glasgow and Edinburgh, and then we should by then have a really good idea of where the final result is going. In terms of the declaration, sometime after 5:30 this morning.
And of course,
morning.
James Max will be here throughout all of that. So from 2. So what are we doing here now? We won't get a result. We won't get a result at all, but we're here to talk about it. So we want to know from you, which way do you hope it will go? Do you hope Scotland will leave the United Kingdom? Do you want them to stay as part of the Union? You can call in with your views and your discussion points. 020 722 42000 is the phone number. You can text 81333. Make sure you start your message with the word London. Email jason.rossum@bbc.co.uk. The other person who is here tonight is Jonathan Davis. And you are there, I think, Jonathan. Hello.
I certainly am. Hello, Jason.
The first Scottish person to speak tonight.
I hope there's going to be more of us.
How excited are you about tonight?
Excited. Do I sound excited?
Well, that's what we're hearing, because I mean, that's in Scotland when they've been talking about it over the last few days. That's the word. That's are you excited? And everyone seems excited by it.
Well, I don't know about excited, but I'll tell you what, it's absolutely fundamental to Britain, probably even to Europe and maybe even the world, because it may affect global markets, depending upon what happens. It's an absolutely huge issue. And if there is a change, well, I'll tell you what, we ain't seen nothing yet, because it's going to be absolutely huge for years, indeed, possibly decades to come.
And as an economist and wealth manager, we have to talk to you about if tomorrow morning they do vote yes and they do become independent. What's the first thing that happens tomorrow when the markets open in the city?
Well, we've already seen, it's very interesting, tens of billions of pounds of capital leave Scotland. So it's already been happening. So I guess it's just an insurance policy in case the vote goes different to what the financiers are wanting. I know the media has got this idea in their head that no, pound goes up, yes, pound goes down. I actually don't buy into that idea. It may well happen. I suspect tomorrow it probably would happen, but it hasn't actually been the case for the last couple of weeks, as commentators have been saying, because actually the pound was weakening for about 2 months before the polls were closing. So, the change in the pound's got nothing to do with Scottish exit.
And talking of the pound, I mean, that's been a major part of the debate, the currency that Scotland will use if it does go independent. What's your take on that? Will they keep how on earth, what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's not actually as complicated as people might make out. There are lots of examples around the world where countries are using the currencies of other countries, such as in South America, there's a couple of countries there using the US dollar.
They used to do it in Cuba. When I went to Cuba, we took the dollar, and then he banned it, I think, Castro.
Well, indeed, but it's openly used in some countries. Even in Switzerland, although of course they have the Swiss franc, it's absolutely tied to the euro. So in effect, you can use either there. In Ireland, for many years, they had the Irish punt, but in effect, it was the British pound. So it's not so complicated. If Scotland, if it comes to it, if they want to use the pound or whatever they want to call it, the Scottish punt or McPound, then they can do.
I like the thistle. Someone said the thistle the other day. I like that. But 2 thistles, please. Well,
indeed. But can I just comment on the Andy Murray thing?
Yes, please do.
We've got to go back on that. In fact, I've got 2 tennis comments to make. If the Yes do win tomorrow or tonight, does that mean that Andy Murray is no longer the first male winner of Wimbledon for a Brit in 77 years?
Yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Is that right?
We're clinging on to it. We're desperate.
And the other thing is, I haven't actually heard that other great world-class tennis player say anything about it. You know, Novak Djokovic.
That's very good.
How come he hasn't said anything?
Yes. Well, he'll be happy if all the English supporters at Wimbledon...
To start booing Murray,
they'll start supporting
Djokovic.
It'd be good for Novak Djokovic and other tennis players. Let's go to our first caller. Jill is in Wimbledon. Oh, Jill.
Hello.
How far away from you from the All England Club are you?
Well, quite a long way, actually.
Oh, nowhere near then. Do you go to the tennis much?
I don't really know. I'm in the care home with arthritis, so I don't get there.
Do you watch it on the telly then?
Well, actually, this sounds dreadful, doesn't it? I've got a bad eye, so I can't watch it on the telly.
You'll have to just listen to it on the radio then.
I'm falling to pieces.
Why don't I just say, do you support Andrew Murray?
Do I support Andy Murray?
Yeah, when he's playing tennis, normally, would you say, yes, go on, Andy Murray, do it for Britain?
Well, when he first was, when he hadn't won, then I wanted him to win. Definitely wanted him to win.
Yeah.
But after he had won, I didn't want him to win again. No, I wanted Federer to win.
Oh, dear. Do you want him to win now after he's come out and said that he supported independence for Scotland last night on the Twitter?
No, I definitely don't.
Now you definitely don't. Will you ever support him again?
No.
Will you support Judy Murray, his mother, in Strictly Come Dancing this weekend?
No.
And why is this, Jill? Is this because you don't like what they stand for?
Yes.
You would have voted no.
Can I just check? What does Judy Murray stand for?
What's that, Paul?
What does Judy Murray stand for, other than being on a dancing show?
Well, she'll be doing a lot of dancing, not a lot of standing.
Yes, but this is a very, very important issue. I mean, I'm 10, so very ancient. But when I was a child, my father loved history, loved Scotland. I was taken up to Edinburgh when I was so young. I can't remember how young I was, but we loved Scotland desperately. My father loved. He's been dead many, many years, but I know, dear man, if he were alive now, he would say, if it's not a no vote. It'll be a tragedy. It'll be a tragedy.
I can hear a bit of emotion in your voice there,
There is. I would be desperately sad because I feel Scotland is part of us historically. I love history. Mary Queen of Scots. It's a part of it. It's a part of Britain's history. It's a part of England's history. To separate Scotland from England would be for me like severing a limb from my body.
Jonathan, you want to say something?
Well, it's still going to be there, and you can still visit it, and it will
It's
still.
not the same.
Well,
Well, it happened in Ireland, didn't it? Jill, did you feel the same about Ireland? I know we're going quite a few years back
No,
now,
that
but
was
do you feel
before my time.
Yes, but would your father have thought the same about Ireland? I mean, some
I
people
really
may
don't
think the
know.
same about Ireland now.
Probably not, but no, probably not. But Scotland, Edinburgh always was very close to my father's heart. I never quite know why. When you're young, you don't ask questions, do you, really? But we went up to Edinburgh a lot. My brother-in-law was Scottish. I got a kilt. I love Scotland. My greatest friend is Scottish. She is now in Australia, keeping her fingers and toes.
What does she think? Does she hope for a no
golly,
too?
She wants no. Everyone I've talked to, all my friends want no. I haven't met a single person that I've spoken to that wants a yes vote.
And do you think, Jill, it will turn out as a no tonight?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Jill, thank you. We'll leave it there. On Twitter today, when I looked this morning, thank you, Jill, for your call. Keep your calls coming in 020 722 4000. When I looked today on Twitter, I was looking at what was trending this morning when I woke up. And in London, the top trending was vote no. In Scotland, in Glasgow, it was vote yes. Now, that's interesting, isn't it?
yeah. Bearing in mind, of course, it's the Scottish who will be voting, not the Londoners.
But what does that mean?
Well, I think
Robert?
it shows the knock-on effect of this and why it affects England, why it affects London tonight. The whole house could come tumbling down in many ways. If it was a yes vote, it could affect who our next prime minister is. It could affect who the next ruling party is. They are the knock-on effects, and that's what makes it so significant. As fascinating as it is to watch the actual result in Scotland tonight, the ramifications are huge.
Absolutely huge. Paul?
Yeah, I mean, if there were a yes vote, for example, you would see 59 MPs out of the House of Commons. Now,
And most
at the
of them are
moment,
Labour.
41 of them at the moment are Labour. So, bearing in mind, under Alex Salmond's plan, and there's no guarantee that this would happen, but under Alex Salmond's plan, he wants Scotland to become independent within 18 months. You would have a general election in the meantime, where if it carried on as planned, 59 MPs would be returned to Scotland. It could be enough for the Labour Party to win that election. But then, less than a year later, if we go according to the timetable Alex Salmond set out, those Labour MPs in Scotland would all have to leave. Labour could find themselves with no majority, and we could have another general election. And as has been said, it could be very difficult for the Labour Party to win elections to a reduced UK Parliament without those Scottish MPs. So when you say, it's obviously it's a decision for people in Scotland, and that's not going to be a factor in their decision making, but it is something that would have an impact for us. We haven't got any sort of concrete numbers through yet, but we have been told already from the Better Together campaign, they've been seeing close to 100% turnout in some areas. Like massive turnout numbers.
Well,
well
I heard
above
some
90%.
polling stations closed early because 100% of the voters had gone in
everyone had
and
already gone.
voted already, and then they closed early and sent the results off early.
I mean, some of these figures, certainly Dundee, we're now talking about possibly 90% turnout there as well.
Wow. I mean, when was the last time we saw a vote like that, a turnout like that in any election?
1950.
What's that?
1950.
Was the last time? What was the turnout then?
It was in the high 80%.
For a general election?
Of course, it was the one where Churchill was re-elected.
Churchill beat Attlee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad
We
you know your
remember
history
him,
better
don't
than
we?
me.
But that's what you do now. Can you imagine London, the London mayoral election, and 97% of voters
Well, would have
voting?
Boris got in?
Well,
if,
the turnouts in
90%.
London mayoral elections hover around 40%. The turnouts in local elections hover around 40%.
And
in
whatever
European
happens-
elections, about 30%. Even general elections, if you go back, I mean, last general election, the turnout was reasonably high. It was over 70%. But if you go back to 2001, which many voters viewed as a bit of a sort of a dead duck election, we knew what the outcome was going to be. 2/3 of voters turned out in a general election. We'd never had anything like that before. And it sparked all these questions about what was democracy dying? How do you get people interested in politics? If you want to look at one of the after effects of this referendum, go up to Scotland and learn lessons from how you engage people in debate, because there isn't a single person who hasn't had a conversation in Scotland about this issue. It's a bit of a bigger
question, though, isn't it? It's a much bigger question, and they've got the 16 and 17-year-olds involved.
Yes, and there's probably a question to be asked about whether you want to extend the right to vote more generally. Some people have suggested, I know that Radio 1 did a massive debate about it, where they said, we have demonstrated, I think, that 16 and 17-year-olds should be entitled to vote. So that's another debate that we can have off the back of this referendum.
Which we can do. If you think 16 and 17-year-olds now should be given the right to vote, maybe in the next election, in the 2015 general election, do you think we should be giving 16 and 17-year-olds the chance to vote now across the UK in all elections? If you want to phone in and talk to me about that, you can do. 020 722 42000 is the phone number. We'll be taking calls throughout the show. And whatever happens tonight, Robert, this is going to change London government, isn't it?
Well, it certainly is. I mean, the consequences, say, for England as a whole are huge, because if it is a no vote, we're already agreed, I'm talking about the English point of view, a lot of concessions are heading Scotland's way. There's going to be a lot of resentment, there's going to be a lot of infighting.
Especially in those northern cities, isn't it? But here in London already, I know Margaret Hodge today was talking about more powers for the Greater London Authority.
Oh, yeah, but you've got to start talking about Cornwall, the north of England, the West Midlands. It could be endless, of course. Yeah. That would raise an argument about stronger powers for English regions. Of course, that will come to the fore again. But I think there'll also be, when this mysterious Devo Max offer, if that comes into force, again, you'll have sort of London MPs, English MPs saying, well, hang on a minute, we need more clout our end as well. And that will become a big, big debate. A lot of pressure would be on Cameron.
Well, funnily enough, talking about London government, we've got Joe Murphy now on the phone. He's the Evening Standard's political editor. Good evening, Joe. How are you?
I'm really good, Jason.
Where are you tonight? Where are you going to be watching the results coming in?
Well, I'm going to watch on TV for a little while for the chatter, but I think by the time the first result comes in, I'll be tucked up, ready for an early start tomorrow. And the big cities are announcing, from 5 or 6 onwards, I'll be watching those, and looking forward to what I think will be a row across the whole of the UK, every bit as big as the one that's been going on in just Scotland.
And specifically here in London, because we're BBC London 94.9, so that's all we're interested in, really. Is it the fact that people in London want more powers? I know Margaret Hodge actually spoke to you, didn't she, today about this?
Margaret wrote us a really interesting article, and she's asking for full autonomy for London over property taxes and possibly some others, which would enable London to really increase the amount of money it would raise and keep to spend on big infrastructure. And she's making the point, why do we have to go cap in hand to central government to get a Crossrail 2 or a Crossrail 3 off the ground, which means decades of delay and election cycles? Why don't we just raise the money and do it ourselves in London? Now, she's an interesting person. She's chairman of the PAC. She's a big beast in the Labour Party.
She's another one that wants to be mayor, isn't she? There's so many on the Labour side that want to be mayor. I mean, there's going to be a real fight to get that mayoral candidate for Labour, isn't it?
There are some enormous people standing or potentially running for mayor of London on the Labour side. So it's going to be a fascinating selection.
And do you think they all think the same as Margaret Hodge does?
I think there's a real consensus going to build up that London ought to get more devolution. Business First, London First, the business lobby group, it's also calling for property taxes to be devolved to London, to give the City Hall some real beef and spending power. Nobody's going to want mayors to be elected in future who can't actually do things, who have to only act as negotiators with other people to do things and get things done.
Do they want the system to change as well, or do they want it to stay the same with a not very powerful Greater London Authority and the mayor at the top running everything, or do they want more powers for the authority to hold the mayor to account more?
I don't think that there is a sort of particular view on that, but as more powers come through, or if more powers come through, democratic accountability has got to be strong, which means the Assembly has got to really stand up there and raise its profile, because I don't think many Londoners could name their Assembly members, let's be honest. And so accountability probably is quite, it's strongly exercised, I think, on the Assembly, but it's got to be publicly known.
What do you think, Paul, there about the Greater London Authority? Do you think they need more power? They should get more power after this, even if there's a no vote?
That is going to come up regardless, because obviously if there is a no vote, the Westminster parties have offered additional devolution of power, and it's quite significant power. It's going to include more tax-raising powers. Though there's an existing act in force that gives the Scottish Parliament some tax-raising power anyway from next year, assuming Scotland's voted to stay in the UK. So there are going to be those arguments, and we've heard those. We've said before we've heard about Cornwall, and we've heard about the northeast of England and Yorkshire and places like that. And there is often this call about London, that if you look at London's economy, it's so different to the rest of the country in terms of how much we produce and how much of the tax revenues of the UK. But equally, if you build a wall around London, the way the tax system works is it takes money from people who have lots of money, and it redistributes some of it through health and social services and education and whatever to people who have less. And frankly, London, yes, to a certain extent, does subsidise not just Scotland, the whole of the rest of the country. Tax revenues from London are spent across the UK.
So that's great. That's going to be great for us then, isn't it, Joe? If it will get more money if there's a yes vote.
Let's wait and see. If there's a yes vote, then in theory, why not? I think if you, as you said, built that wall, we'd all think we were living in clover. Of course, there could be a currency crisis in between and a few other little things that would go wrong, but I dare say the London economy would float like a liner through it. But in terms of money compared with the UK, it's a funny thing. The Barnett formula gives Scotland a lot of extra money per head. And yet, there are parts around London, take Thanet on the East Coast, they probably deserve some of that money.
And some parts of London, some poor London boroughs, Newham, Tower Hamlets, so. Hackney.
Yeah, and Tower Hamlets especially, I think it's got the highest levels of poverty in the UK in some of those wards. So why are we subsidising Scotland to such an extent when there are these pockets of poverty in our own backyard?
Joe Murphy, the Standard's political editor, thank you very much. Get some sleep to get up early in the morning. Joe Murphy there from the Evening Standard talking about the implications for London and Westminster on this Scottish referendum where we're getting the results. The counting is underway. The referendum result will come through at about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, with the time at 10:31, we've got through the first half hour, and with the time at 10:31, here's Will Schindler with the latest news headlines.
London's headlines. The polls have officially closed in the Scottish independence referendum. Counting is getting underway in Edinburgh at the National Count Centre in Ingliston. Postal votes are first, with the first ballot boxes expected to start arriving at around 10:45. We're told a final result is expected shortly after 6 o'clock. Militants from the Islamic State group have posted a video on the internet showing a British hostage who questions the UK government's foreign policy. The man identifies himself as John Cantley and says he was captured as he worked as a newspaper journalist. Mr. Cantley directly addresses the Western public as he sits at a desk and delivers a scripted speech into the camera. Met Police searching for the missing 14-year-old Alice Gross say they're treating a man with a murder conviction as a suspect in her disappearance. Arnis Zalkans, who's a 41-year-old builder from Latvia, spent 7 years in prison after being convicted of murder in his home country in 1998. Alice was last seen on CCTV at Brentford Lock 3 weeks ago. And in sport, the Fulham manager Felix Magath has been dismissed from his post as manager. It followed his side's 5-3 defeat to Nottingham Forest last night. London's weather, a generally cloudy night in store. There's a risk of a few heavy and perhaps thundery showers spreading north later on in the early hours. A minimum temperature of 15 degrees Celsius. That is 59 degrees Fahrenheit.
BBC London 94.9, the latest travel news. Well, still disruption if you're heading out onto the A308 Cromwell Road eastbound around Kingston upon Thames. It's partially blocked at the moment because of an accident involving a bus and a car near to the junction with Queen's Elizabeth Road. Looking very slow on the sensors on the approach. If you're heading around Ealing, better news. Now there was some earlier slow traffic around on the A406 because the light's not working at Ealing Common. Those delays, looking at the cameras and sensors, have certainly eased. In terms of public transport, disruption on the Metropolitan line, severe delays present between Wembley Park and Aldgate, and there's minor delays on the rest of the line because of a signal failure at Baker Street. And still disruption to Air France services to and from Heathrow Airport. That's because of strike action by pilot unions, so passengers are being advised to check the status before heading off to the airport. Steve Mason, BBC London 94.9, more travel just before 11.
BBC London 94.9.
I'd like to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this.
Vanessa Feltz.
If you can explain a little bit more about how just the idea of having a bath is too much effort, it's just too much.
Weekday mornings from 9.
Most of the time I've got the curtains closed because I can't bear the sunlight in my eyes.
What would you like to tell us?
And I'm on the phone because I want to help highlight it. It's such a personal thing to me, but also to the nation, because I think it's a silent killer.
Vanessa Feltz.
When you were thinking of giving your child a little box of raisins, what should you have given them instead?
My view is you shouldn't give them anything at all.
Weekday mornings from 9.
Would you like to have grown up with Claire Byam Cook?
I think I would have left home before, but I couldn't live on shreddies.
BBC London 94.9.
I wonder what Vanessa Feltz is going to be talking about tomorrow morning from 9 till midday. Would it be Scotland? I assume it will be. She'll be here from 9 tomorrow morning, and the Breakfast Show with Penny Smith and Nick Godwin also picking up the results, and the results will be announced. I'm sure, Paul, will you still be here at that time? I'm sure you will be.
I will be walking to my car at 6 a.m. Come what may, obviously.
Very important news, though, because we've got a poll. Now, it's not an exit poll, is it? But it's the first poll after the vote.
And it's important that we say that, because exit polls that you're used to in general elections, instead of saying who will you vote for, they literally stand at the exit and say who did you vote for, and they're generally very, very accurate. The margin of error is generally a lot lower than for an
So why hasn't there
poll.
been an exit poll?
Nobody paid for an exit poll this time. This is a YouGov poll. It is been conducted today, but it hasn't been done outside the polling stations, and it suggests that it's going to be 46% yes, 54% no.
Massive difference.
If that's true, then that's a widening from where we'd seen the polls before, but equally that it was widening in the final couple of days. If you looked at some of the opinion polls, it had gone from the 51-49. It had started to move out. The last polls that were done yesterday were saying 53-47 for no. This is suggesting that if this is correct, that the no is just stretched a little bit further out.
Jonathan Davis, is this because of Gordon Brown? And that storming speech yesterday, I mean, it was, wasn't it?
I think that the postal votes have probably got far more no's in them than yeses. And I don't think that's been heavily talked about or as much as other issues. So I think, therefore, that's now coming out, and I imagine that what Paul's just said there from YouGov is probably going to be the net result in the morning.
Like an 8-point lead for no.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Why were those polls that were all over the place then, saying that they were 1 point in the lead? Yes, and blah, blah, blah.
They were very close, and there were always a pretty tight margin for error. But I wouldn't be surprised if there is a significant majority for no change, because that's ultimately what's going on here. People hate change. And when you think about it,
and it's a big change,
the whole establishment and her dog, the banking community, the international banking community, all the politicos from Westminster, including outside, such as Nigel Farage, all the major heavyweights were saying vote no, and there weren't that many people saying vote yes, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if that's the end result.
Jason, the other thing that is worth pointing out is that you can look at this and say, oh, well, the yes were so close, and if this is correct, then they've fallen way behind. 3 months ago, it was 60-40 for a no. So it doesn't alter the fact that the yes campaign had the momentum until the final days. And there's an argument about whether Gordon Brown made a big difference in those final days and some of the promises that were made from the Westminster politicians. But the momentum in the last month of campaigning was very much with Alex Salmond with the yes camp. And if it has finished up at 54-46, they haven't got the win that they wanted, but they have shown that is still 46% of Scotland's population, nearly 2 million people voting to leave the UK.
This is bad for the pollsters, though, isn't it? I mean,
it's very difficult, though, for the pollsters because we weren't used to it. It's not a general election or a by-election. We're used to having polls with Labour, Liberal Democrats, Tories. To judge the relevance of this poll was always difficult. It's a one-off.
And there was some
Scottish
people
referendum
that we hadn't voted before,
of
like
course,
the 16-17-year-olds.
there's so many factors that made it a lot more unpredictable. I felt tonight coming into it it was almost like one of those boxing matches where both sides saying they're going to win. And in fact, it could end up being quite one-sided. It felt very unclear, very difficult to be that clever about it, judging the result beforehand.
See, I always thought the no would win by about 6 to 8. And look,
there you are, calling it at 10:40.
So Robin Wales is the Mayor of Newham, and he joins me now. Did you always know? I mean, we don't know the result yet, Sir Robin, but it's from this poll, and it's not an exit poll. There's an 8-point lead for the no in this YouGov poll, this one that's just come out. So Robin Wales, how do you feel about that?
Well, I'd be quite happy to settle for that at this point and not bother with the count. But I suspect we should wait for the count. We know that, for example, in 92, an exit poll was wrong, so we just wait. I think YouGov is a very, very reliable polling organisation, the one I have most faith in. But hey, let's wait to see the result. I certainly hope.
However, YouGov was that poll that was 1 point ahead a couple of weeks ago. The markets were in turmoil, weren't they?
Well, things swing around. Polls, things always get closer. I was talking to the guy that organised the Glasgow elections, last local elections, and he was saying, they always get closer as you're running along. It's also, I think, quite significantly a vote against politics as usual. People are losing. And many of the people that vote have lost faith in our political class. And we've got to ask ourselves some very serious questions about the amount of disenchantment there is with politics generally. And it isn't just the expensive scandal. It's generally, I think there's a problem with parties reaching out to lots of people who work hard but perhaps don't earn so much. And I think that's where some of this vote came from tonight. I think it's a sign about a wider problem with our politics.
So, Robin, it's Paul Osborne here. If I can just ask, you were saying about that problem with engagement with politics. You can't argue there's a lack of engagement in Scotland in this campaign. Do you think there are lessons that we can learn from the way the campaign was run?
See, I think that's what's happened. I think that across Europe, I was actually at a conference to talk about this, across Europe, we are losing many people who work hard, who don't feel they're being listened to, and we're not talking to them in a sensible way. What's happened here is that many of those people have now voted. And this is an opportunity to effectively give people a kick. I don't think that's entirely the motivation, but we've lost these people. And in the end, the argument was, well, you can't trust Westminster, you can't trust, the yes campaign was a very negative campaign. I'd say quite a vicious campaign quite often. But I think it is a sign of a bigger problem in politics. But if it is the result, then thank goodness for that, and thank goodness my countrymen have taken a sensible decision.
So, Robin, ultimately, is this going to lead to more of people like you, mayors across, directly elected mayors, not just across London boroughs, but in big regional centres and cities in the north, for instance?
We're hoping to see, if devolution is okay for the people of Scotland, why is it not all right for the people in London and the people in Newham? If decisions can be made in Scotland, why not in London?
Would you like more powers as a directly elected mayor for your borough?
Right, let me tell you a wee secret. There's not a politician born that doesn't want more powers. So they'll dress it up any way you like. But yes, I came into politics to make a difference. I want powers to change and do that. I don't just want them for their own sake. Many politicians are like that. So yes, I would like more powers. I have to say, I'm sitting here, the council that's had the biggest cuts in the country is Newham, and we're managing to hold services together because we're working out. If the government was as efficient as we are, we could save lots in our tax system.
Robert, what do you think?
I think there will be.
Robin?
Well, no, I just think that when if it is a no vote, tonight, then the pressure will still be on, because there's going to be so many concessions made to Scotland still. We've committed so much already. We've seen the political leaders running up with what were described as their garage flowers in recent days, and so much has been promised. There's bound to be then a response to that by London, by other parts of England.
And
Wales,
would you like to see more directly elected mayors like Sir Robin?
Of course I'd like to see more directly elected mayors like Sir Robin.
Isn't there just too much government? There'll be too many layers of government.
No, that's not the point. The point is push power down to the lowest level you can. We're currently going through an exercise where we're pushing all sorts of powers and money down to a much lower level. A lower level, we have 330,000 people in Newham, so we have to push powers on youth, on play, on activity, on sport, on mental health, on adults. We're putting a lot of stuff down to a more local level. You should take decisions at the lowest level you can. And I think if you do that, actually, you don't have too much government. You have government where it should reside, as close to the people as you can possibly manage.
I couldn't agree more, Sir Robin. You know, it's very interesting. I wrote a blog on this a few weeks ago. Until a few weeks ago, I actually couldn't care less what happened in this particular vote, because ultimately I decided that if Scotland stayed or Scotland left, there'll be wins and losses on both sides. It wouldn't really matter. But suddenly I had a eureka moment. I'm a macroeconomist. I looked around the world at Hong Kong, Singapore, the cantons in Switzerland, the Länder in Germany, where the government is close to the governed, then it's easier for the governed to control the government. Now, you say about pushing power down to the as close as possible. I'd say push power down to the people. Yep. So get government close to the people. Yeah. The people can then control the government, and then generally, I've seen around the world, you'll get more effective parliaments, more effective government. With regards to devolving power to the regions, Yorkshire, Wales, Cornwall, Newham or whatever, I'm all for it. And if that means that ultimately, although obviously it's never going to happen, it's pie in the sky probably, Westminster loses its power, well, so be it, because that for me would be like Brussels losing its power. Oh my God, I would love that to happen.
It's appropriate levels. You can't run an economy in a small scale. Defence is a big, but other things can come close. Health can come close in many ways. You've got to look at each area and decide, how can I most get it close? How can I most nearly get it close to people so that then decisions matter? And the more we do that, the more, for example, then local elections will matter. I have to say, though, the media is just not the slightest bit interested in local issues. It's always focusing on Westminster, and I think that's a huge mistake, because so many things happen locally. And there's so much. Oh,
come on, Sir Robin. We have you on all the time talking about Newham. We very meticulously look at what's going on at City Hall. But a lot of it is not very interesting, is it? What they do at the Greater London Authority isn't very interesting. It's quite boring for a lot of people.
Oh, now, you see, that's a very difficult question to answer. Some of my friends are Assembly members. I
mean, they're lovely people. I know them myself. And I interview them all the time, and it's great. But it's not very interesting.
But it is interesting what the mayor does, and it is interesting what happens in councils like mine where decisions are made that affect people's lives. The problem we've got is we need to look at developing a better way of reporting locally. The one weakness I am concerned about in the system we've got is you need to have a local press and media that holds you to account. And that's something we need to work through, because I think when I do something, I should be subject to scrutiny by a local media, and we don't really have that.
Yeah, well, we hopefully we do our best in scrutinising you.
London-wide, how often are you going to come to Newham, even though it's the most interesting council in London?
I think Tower Hamlets is the most interesting at the moment. But Robert, you've got something to say.
Regarding the very relevant regional and local political argument as well. The truth is, outside London, a number of major cities had the option for elected mayors and said no.
Yes.
They did not want them. We're talking about England, of course, here. Maybe that will change in time.
Prescott,
maybe there'll be more appetite for that in time. But that was a very clear message that the likes of Manchester and Birmingham were not interested.
And Yorkshire and the Humber, they'd had a vote on it, didn't they? And then, of course, we had the monkey elected in Hartlepool, or wherever it was.
That was kind of... Remember, a lot of the mayors were introduced in places that effectively politics had broken down. in lots of places, Hartlepool, Stoke, South all round the place, politics have broken down in many cases, and the previous system hadn't worked. Now, it happens, I've had this argument with Richard Leeson in Manchester. He thinks they can run perfectly satisfactorily without a mayor. Again, they're bringing a lot of councillors together in the Manchester region. It isn't just Manchester City itself. I'm less bothered about the structure of it and more concerned about giving the power to people so they can exercise. And I think some of the core cities are showing the way with the demands they're having for more power devolved to them. I say again, councils are so much more efficient than the government that the more we can push down to councils, the better it will be for all of us.
Well, not all councils, I would say.
No, but on average, you see, I mean, what happens is that what will happen. I'll give you an example.
And also, Sir Robin, there aren't many elected mayors in London, are there? In London boroughs, there's only 3 or 4, isn't there?
There's 4. 3 of them are very good. The 3 Labour ones. Can I give you an example? Steve in Lewisham, Steve Bullock introduced a young mayor scheme. And I got pinned against the wall by a kid from Lewisham who said, why haven't you got a young mayor in Newham? And I thought, well, that's a good idea. So we went and looked at it, and so we introduced a system here that improved on what Steve had done, because we looked at it and we asked them what they'd have done differently. That's how local government works. Somebody does something clever, other people say, oh, I want some of that, and then lots more fall into line. Not all councils are great, I get that, but overall, you look at the level of cuts that councils have implemented in this country, and you compare it to what the government's achieved, we are the people that have actually managed to deliver what the government says you should. Of course, it's unfair because it's the poorer areas that have taken the bulk of the beating, but we are much more efficient in general than government.
I just wonder, Sir Robin, how much, excuse me, when you talk about devolving power down as low as it'll go, how much of your role is about leadership and how much of it is about sort of being a figurehead? In the same way that Boris Johnson is kind of Mr. London, every London borough has dozens of councillors who make all these decisions about spending, but you know, Boris Johnson is sort of Mr. London on the global stage. You are sort of Mr. Newham on the London stage. Is the principal advantage of having a mayor that area, borough, city, county, whatever it is, has a spokesman?
And people understand the legitimacy of it, so we can work with businesses who say, yeah, we get. I was leader, and I had much less influence than I have as mayor, where people say, we get that you have a legitimacy and a legitimate role. But the other interesting thing that's different is that when I was leader, I would have worried about pushing power down. I think it's got to go through democratic structures, that's why we elect people, and I would have worried that things can go wrong locally. Well, now, with a mayor able to hold the ring, you can push the power down, and if something goes seriously wrong, as it can often do, if it's you're pushing it down to other levels, you can recover it much more easily. So I think you can take a lot more risks, and consequently, I'm able to push power down to local councillors, working in their communities, and I think we'll see some quite interesting results in that in the next few years.
So, Robin, I have a question about the efficiency, as you say, of local councils. What do you say to the accusation that local councils, of course, have had cuts in their budgets, but the councils themselves have cut frontline services more than the pay and perks of senior managers?
Well, I can talk about Newham particularly.
You did talk generally before, actually, Sir Robin.
But if I give you the example, it's quite interesting. We moved all our buildings to one building, and we've been looking at the way the channels that people are able to communicate with us. We've brought all our, and I'll explain why that. We've brought all, for example, we moved libraries to slightly better, brought libraries and community centres together, so we save money and all that. Now, interestingly, I was at LGA conference recently where a lot of the councils are now doing exactly the same. And we'd done it earlier, but I can see them all now coming around to doing it. It's quite interesting, actually. We get out to 28 buildings and went to one, saved a lot of money, and Eric Pickles criticised us for it. But we did it with a strategy. So I think what's happening is people are trying to do that. Some have cut frontline services. That's absolutely true. We've tried really hard not to do that here in Newham. I think we've been quite successful, though it's going to be very difficult in the next few years. So some will do that, but the vast majority haven't. Now, if I compare that to government and government's failure to deliver things, I could run through. I said to somebody the other day, you should give local government responsibility for defence procurement because we couldn't do a worse job.
Listen, Sir Robin Wales, thank you very much. We'll continue to hold you account the best we can here at BBC London 94.9. Paul?
I'll hold you to account for the poll. We actually get that result tonight, I'll tell you. Thanks very much.
Hold on, Robin. Are you still there?
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say we have very few facts this early in the evening, but just a couple of things. We're actually starting to get some stuff about bad weather starting to affect it. Stornoway Airport was shut for a time because of fog. So the ballot boxes are now going to have to be brought over by boat. We've had some reports that some offshore workers on some of the oil rigs weren't able to cast votes because dozens of helicopter flights had to be cancelled after about 4 o'clock this afternoon because the weather was so bad. But I just wanted to share this with Sir Robin because I think this is my favourite election fact so far, which was tweeted by someone from National Public Radio in the United States. The final result that is read out in the morning by the counting officer of the referendum is legally binding. Even if she gets it wrong. If she gets it wrong and mixes them up and says it's a yes when it's a no,
she can still be
legally binding.
Wow.
I don't know why we wasted all that money in the campaign. We should have braved that. Clearly, that was fantastic. It's interesting you raise that, because I noticed in one of the papers today, it was one of the American papers, I'm just trying to remember which one it was, picked up the issue about the Shetlands. Because, of course, the Shetlands aren't really Scottish. They're part of Scotland, but they really kind of got very strong Norwegian ties. And
they've got quite strong Norwegian type of accents as well, don't they? They don't sound Scottish, they sound more Scandinavian.
The oil is theirs.
Oh, it's theirs?
Oh, yeah. It's
Shetlands oil.
It's round Shetland, so it's really quite interesting. What happens if they vote no and Scotland votes yes? It's one of the issues I'm very surprised. I think the no campaign was absolutely inept. Absolutely inept. We did not put our case very well.
Do you think Gordon Brown brought it to life yesterday? I mean, what did you think of his speech?
Do you know, one of the things I said to somebody about Gordon Brown, I said, what's that man ever done? Saved the international financial system from collapse. We don't give him credit for what he did.
Saved the world, didn't he? He claimed that in the House of Commons
I would have some sympathy with that,
Please.
No, well, you'd expect me to do that, wouldn't you?
What I would say from a more impartial view, watching Brown was fascinating. Here was a man so awkward in his own skin as Prime Minister.
Yes.
And seeing this, constantly looking hindered and troubled, seeing that man come to life over the last few days has been fascinating.
Why wasn't he leading it from the start?
It's a very good question. And I mean, the relationship between Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling is probably going to be even worse now.
It was inept from beginning to end, the whole campaign. And there's a real problem, I think, in Scotland with us putting our case and explaining what we stand for.
Did you go up and help, Sir Robin?
I've been out campaigning at various times there, but not during the referendum. I was getting very cross. I was surprised why we didn't do more. There's an awful lot of people in England wanted to help. Most of the Scots I know in England would have supported no, because we haven't left our country. We're British.
It's actually fair to say that there were a lot of Conservative MPs who were ordered not to go to Scotland to boost the yes vote.
Although the one that people are looking at and seeing rise up is Ruth Davidson, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives. People are liking her. There's been a lot of support for her on Twitter and the way she handled some of the debates on television and around the country.
I would say, I agree with Rob in terms of the actual campaign. The no campaign has looked like a very cold, mild-mannered bank manager, sort of patronising and warning you, saying, well, we'd be most concerned for you if you do this, you don't quite understand the consequences. It's been a very unsexy way for a campaign. It's the romanticism of the yes campaign, because it's far bigger, and it's been that's been a far more emotive message.
Should it really have been the other way around, where you voted yes to stay within the United Kingdom and not to?
It's not as glamorous an argument to make, let's keep stuff the same. It never is politically.
I don't agree. I look at the history of this country, Britain. It's a wonderful history. And it's interesting when Salmon started to talk about NHS, that was given to us by a Welshman. And you go back to the Second World War, you go back to the Industrial Revolution, you go back to the stuff that's been done by this nation is something we should be proud of. We should have been saying we're proud to be British. What do we care if two French noblemen were knocking lumps out of each other 700, 800 years ago? Why do we care about that? 700 years ago. We should have taken a stand.
So, Robin, are you going to be staying up all night to watch this?
Until I know the actual result. Unfortunately, I have to go to Birmingham a little tomorrow, but yes, I'm staying up for a while. As soon as I've finished with you, I'm off round to meet a few friends.
Oh, fantastic. Well, have a nice night, won't you? So, Robin Wales, the Mayor of Newham, Scottish Mayor here in London, one of our directly elected mayors in one of our London boroughs. Yes, Newham. And this is BBC London 94.9. In the next few minutes, we're going to get some travel news and we'll get the latest news headlines from Will Schindler. But first, let me read some of the emails that I've had coming into me. jason.rossum@bbc.co.uk is my email address. Thank you to Mark, who says, good evening, Jason and Mel, who's hosting the off-air award-winning phone-in. To be quite honest, I'll be pleased when it's all over and we can resume normality. At least I've had a rest from the Scots debate down with Joanne Good and Anna Webb at Woof Woof Club. That's Mark in Bletchley Towers. And hi to Jonathan Davis, he says. It's the barking hour. We've got Robert saying, oh no, we can't read that one out. I have seen that Andy Murray's been rowing back from the tweets he was alleged to have posted and has now said he will always play for Team GB in itself. That's not very clear. Thank you to Gareth Paul in Brazil, I think, who's talking about that. Robert, you were checking that for us.
Yeah,
is that true?
He hasn't come on Twitter to say anything, but he may have said something elsewhere. But let's be honest, Andy Murray is not going to say, I tell you what, if this is a no vote tonight, I'm out. I'm not going to play for Britain. He's not going to.
That's why he didn't tweet till 1:30 in the morning.
Well, I think he may have had one energy bar too many. I think it's far more important for sportsmen to keep out of these sort of debates normally.
Just one more email before we go to the travel news for London. This is from Paul. I don't think they will, but if the Scots leave the UK, it will be in large part because of the utter toxicity of the Conservative Party up there. A lot of Scots will be voting yes purely as an anti-Tory act. Well, it's certainly what the No campaign wanted, what the Yes campaign wanted. I've seen popular pro-independence banners with the slogan "End Tory Rule for Good." He says Labour's big mistake has been joining with the Tories and Lib Dems in a single No campaign. They've been tainted by association. They should have run their own separate No campaign with Gordon Brown leading it. Thanks very much for your email, Paul. Let us go now to the travel news. We'll have more after the news at 11, but here's the travel now with Steve Mason.
Cool.
Well, starting off in Tolworth, problems for the A240. You'll find it closed in both directions because of an accident near to the junction with the B3364. Again, that's causing disruption with slow traffic on the approach. Better news around Kingston upon Thames. The A308 Cromwell Road eastbound is all reopened. It was closed off for a while near to the junction with Queen Elizabeth Road, but all now being reopened and traffic moving nicely through that area. In terms of public transport, on the Metropolitan line, you'll find disruption with severe delays between Wembley Park and Aldgate, with minor delays on the rest of the line. That's because of signal failure at Baker Green. And in terms of disruption to Heathrow Airport,